Hi, my name is Trevor Klee, and this is the GMAT Critical Reasoning process for assumptions. So in a previous video, I talked about the critical reasoning process in general. In this, I discussed the strategy, which is always to discuss the argument first, or to understand the argument first, and then try to pick the right answer. This is especially important for assumptions. If you just skim the argument, you're really not going to get a good sense of what the argument's talking about. And so you're also not going to get a good sense of how to really understand the argument. So then, your chance of finding the assumption, which by its nature is hidden in the argument, is pretty much nil. So we really got to put a big emphasis on understanding the argument. Okay, so let's briefly discuss the process. And so we can spend more time on assumptions. So our process is always going to be, we find the conclusion first, which is like an opinion or a plan or a prediction, and we put therefore in front of it. Now, the reason why we put therefore in front of it is we want to understand it as a conclusion. It's something that the rest of the argument leads to. ... Therefore this. It's really important that the conclusion is something that we can disagree with. So it can't be a fact or a premise. It needs to be something that can be disagreed with, which is what makes it a conclusion. Our second step in the process is to find the reasoning and put because in front of the reasoning. So you might also hear this as like the premise, right? So, and we really want to make sure we understand how the reasoning leads to the conclusion. So we want because ... therefore this. This is a really important thing to like get really specific. How does the reasoning lead to the conclusion? Because normally it's in here that we will find our gaps. And our gaps are basically our assumptions. If we can be very careful about, the gap between the reasoning and the conclusion, maybe the conclusion introduces a new word or a new idea. If we're really careful about that, if we're really careful about the gap between the reasoning and the conclusion, well, then, we're all set. We found the assumption. And then all we have to do is find the correct answer choice that basically points out the gap. So that is the process in a nutshell, as it specifically relates to assumptions. I discussed this more in an earlier video. So now let's go on to some examples. Before I start in with the examples, I just want to say that my examples, my process, and a lot more examples are detailed in my book, The Critical Reasoning Process, which you can find on my Gumroad page, which is gumroad.com/Trevor Klee. All right, cool. So let's go through this stuff. So these are actual GMAT critical reasoning examples, and these are really difficult questions. They're 700 plus. So let's put the process to work in this. So the cognitive scientist says, using the pioneering work of comparative psychologist Gordon Gallup as a model, several studies have investigated animals' capacity for mirror self-recognition, MSR. Most animals exposed to a mirror respond only with social behavior such as aggression. However, in the case of the great apes, repeated exposure to mirrors leads to self-directed behaviors, such as exploring the inside of the mouth, suggesting that these animals reflect their reflection as an image of self. The implication of these studies is that the great apes have a capacity for self-awareness unique among non-human species. Okay, cool. So our conclusion is here, right? It's the implication. The great apes have a capacity for self-awareness unique among non-human species. That's the implication. All right, and what's the reasoning? Well, because when they get the repeated exposure to mirrors, right, such as exploring the inside of the mouth, they recognize the reflection as an image of self. So they see the mirrors, they explore the inside of their mouth, and they recognize the reflection as an image of self. So the implication is that they have a capacity for self-awareness unique among non-human species. So in terms of our gaps here, we've got a couple gaps. The first is the capacity for self-awareness is something. Let me just actually draw a box around this. The self-awareness is something which was not present in our reasoning and suddenly comes up in our conclusion. So we need something that points out that it wasn't present in our reasoning and is, now suddenly present in our conclusion. The other thing that we need to point out here is that it's unique among non-human species. That's a very strong statement. It's saying the great apes are the only one who can do this, which is surprising because it says most animals respond with this and great apes respond with this. So it says great apes are the only ones who do this. That's a very strong statement. I'd say, if they said unique or that's rare among non-human species, that'd probably be more defendable than unique. We've got, can we guarantee that there's no other animal who has this capacity for self-awareness? So that's the two things that are really, our big gaps here. We suddenly introduce self-awareness and we say they're unique among non-human species, but we, really just say most other ones don't respond to a mirror this way. All right. So now in terms of our assumptions, let's look through this. Gallup's work has established that the great apes have a capacity for MSR unique among non-human species. I don't think Gallup's work needs to establish this. It says Gallup's work was a model, but it doesn't need Gallup's work to do this. All right. If an animal does not have the capacity for MSR, it does not have the capacity for self-awareness. So that's pretty good. That gives us the link between MSR and self-awareness. Basically says it's necessary to have MSR to have self-awareness. If you don't have MSR, you cannot be self-aware. So that's pretty good. All right, C. If a researcher exposes an animal to a mirror and that animal exhibits social behavior, that animal is incapable of being self-aware. No, so that's not what we want. We just want that if they don't exhibit the self-directed behaviors, if they never exhibit the self-directed behaviors, then they're not self-aware. But it's not if they ever exhibit social behavior. D, when exposed to a mirror, all animals display either social behavior or self-directed behavior. We don't really need that. Maybe they just mess around. Maybe they ignore the mirror. Maybe they treat the mirror as a frisbee. And then E, animals that do not exhibit MSR may demonstrate a capacity for self-awareness in other ways. No, that can't be right. The whole point is that MSR is necessary. So we really only have B, which forges this really strong connection between MSR and self-awareness. You need MSR for self-awareness. The rest of these don't have that same thing that you need MSR for self-awareness, therefore the great apes are self-aware and other animals are not. All right, cool. So that is our first assumption question. Here's another one that's quite tricky. So let's read it, find the conclusion, find the reasoning, look at our gaps. All right, Super Express Shipping Company has implemented a new distribution system that can get almost every package to its destination the day after it's sent. The company worries that this more efficient system will result in lower sales of its premium next-day delivery service because its two-day service will usually arrive the following day anyway. The company plans to encourage sales of its next-day service by intentionally delaying delivery its two-day packages so that they will not be delivered the following day, even if the package arrives at its destination city in time for next-day delivery. Okay, so our conclusion here is their plan, which is they're going to encourage sales of the next-day service by intentionally delivering delay of its two-day packages, even if it arrives in time. So they're going to try to encourage sales of their next day by delaying delivery of their two-day. And the reasoning is pretty much, apparently no one's buying the two-day. or no one's buying the next day because 2-day will arrive the following day anyways. So no one's going to buy the next day because 2-day will arrive the next day anyways. So the company's plan assumes that. All right, so let's look through. We need something that, like, what is our link here between encouraging sales of your next day service and intentionally delaying delivery of their 2-day packages? Well, it's pretty much that our link is that the plan has to work, right? That's our link. And this is actually going to, help sell its next day service, and people will be able to reason through this in the way the company wants them to, which is I should get the next day if I don't want delivered in 2 days. So A, deliberate delay of packages will not affect the company's image in a way that significantly reduces its ability to attract and retain customers. Yeah, that's pretty much perfect, right? So that's a pretty much perfect assumption because it does tell us that this whole plan is going to work. Their sales are going to increase if they delay delivery of their 2-day packages, because that'll work in the way that the company thinks it will. So if we think on it, if we want to check A, we can try negating it, right? And that's just crossing out this not. So what would happen if deliberate delay of packages will affect the company's image in a way that significantly reduces its ability to attract and retain customers? Well, then that would hurt the argument. So if negating it hurts the argument, it's pretty much a necessary assumption. So that's often a good tactic. All right. B, company's plan assumes that most people do not have a preference for either next day or 2-day or next day delivery. No, I mean, if they don't, then no one's going to care that they delay, so they're not going to want to switch to next day. C, if the plan is not implemented, the company would lose more money. No, we don't care. They don't need to think we're going to lose more money. We just need to think that they're worried about losing sales of their next day delivery service. The overnight service is too expensive to be attractive to most customers currently. No, if it's too expensive, then they're going to have a hard time encouraging sales anyways, but that has nothing to do with whether delaying the 2 days is a good idea or not. E, competing companies' delivery service rarely deliver packages to their destination earlier than at promised time. That doesn't matter. Our whole point is, will delaying these packages be a bad idea or not? So that is why A is the correct answer here. When we negate it, we find out why that is. All right, cool. So that is the assumption process. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe for more videos, and please get my guide, Critical Reasoning Process, which is available on gumroad.com/Trevor Klee, link in the description. All right, thank you very much.